Natalie Brunswick of the highly sensitive family.
Hello, my dear.
Welcome. Oh
Thank
my
you for
gosh.
having
It's so funny
me.
because the moment you came on, I was like, hey, bud, as if I know you
I know.
so well.
I'm like, I wish I could just like hang out on your couch and we could just chill and like
Oh,
spend the afternoon talking. Wouldn't that
well,
be
I've been
nice?
really hoping to do like an event where we could like all hang out, because it's been like a year and a half of this beautiful podcast and so many amazing people have come on and maybe we should just hang out. So
You
I'm
should
just
do it.
in
I
that
actually had a
process right
vision
now.
of it. I was like thinking of like all
Okay.
the incredible people you've had on. I'm like, wouldn't it be amazing if like all of us could get together selfishly? Because you've had some incredible people on. I'm like, I want to meet some of these
I
people.
know. I know. I want to meet some of these people again. Like I am so,
Just do it.
we should just do it.
Yeah.
Well, what we really should do, what we really should do is introduce you and say that I feel like I know you because I think you share so authentically, so helpfully, so of your heart in your writing and in your courses. I took your sleep course. And it really makes me feel like I know you and that I know a little bit more about myself too. So I just wanted to thank you for that, for your wholeheartedness, for your sensitive soul, for your work in the world. We have your bio in the show notes, but I like to ask people to maybe introduce themselves as they are today. Like, who are you? Who is Natalie Brunswick today?
Mm, I will share. But first, I also just want to say thank you because I remember when I first came across your profile, I was like, what a freaking joy. Like the joy and like exuberance for life that you bring to your account and like what you put out into the world. It's infectious and it is beautiful and so authentically you, and I like look forward to seeing you every time you like show up. So I just wanted
Thank
to like
you.
throw that back. Throw
You know,
that
I
back at
forget
you.
how badly I I need to hear that sometimes, and to hear that from you really, really makes my day. Really does. Like that powerful reflection from someone that I really admire. It really means a lot to me. Thank you.
You are
Who are
welcome.
you?
So who am I? My goodness, what a loaded question,
I
huh?
know. I know.
So I'm a mom to two
Mm,
boys.
mm,
I'm a wife. I am a therapist. So I am an occupational therapist and a psychotherapist, which
mm.
is part of what landed me into the world of my Instagram account, being able to bring like my OT lens around pediatrics and sensory and neurodiversity and all of that stuff. And also my work as a trauma therapist. I mostly do
Mm,
trauma work with adults, teenagers and adults.
mm.
And I remember like when I became a mom, like a few months after when you start pre-pandemic, when you start going to like the mom and baby groups. And I remember like walking into the groups and being like, listening to the way moms were talking about sleep
Mm.
and be like, you all sound like my car accident patients. Like moms just like, it was like all these new moms were just like walking like traumatized bodies who were so anxious about sleep in particular, but everything.
Yeah.
And so that kind of started my journey into parenting and parents' mental health and
Mm,
family mental health
mm.
and what became my Instagram account because it just was like this thing. As soon as I became a parent, I was like, oh, we have all these anxious traumatized parents. Of course we have all these anxious kids. Like we
Right.
have an epidemic and we all need more support and nobody's talking about the nervous system to parents. And
Mm.
so I just started talking and couldn't shut up. And here I am like 2 years later.
2 years
And
and like 100,000 people later. I mean, and
mhm.
beautiful, beautiful, thoughtful content. Your aesthetic is so clean and so inviting, and rather private. I noticed that you actually don't share like the photos of your children, but you share of their your experience of them, which is really helpful. I mean, it's really wildly helpful. And the interesting thing about um, being an audience member and really a student of yours is that you don't separate yourself from the pack, which I think is a new thing in psychotherapy. And perhaps like the coaching model has helped, and the sort of democratization of social media, which has absolute downfalls. But what I really appreciate is that you use your storytelling to say, I'm on this journey with you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something I promised myself I would do. Like, I'm a kid who really struggled. Like, I struggled with my mental health for years, and came from like dysfunction,
Mm,
and felt really alone, and didn't actually find so much help from the establishment. Like, did not actually find the medical model to be the thing that helped me. What saved me was books and
mm.
stories and memoirs and people sharing their stories.
Wait. Oh,
And
oh my God, that's so
yeah, go,
crazy
go,
because
go.
when I was a child, I also like devoured biographies, which,
Mhm.
is essentially what this podcast is, right? It's like biography after biography because I find people I felt it was so healing. Memoirs. And
So
like
healing.
yeah.
So
And
healing. And
being empathetic, and I think if we can get into what a highly sensitive person is, which I identify as, partially thanks to you. I think knowing that, like the hero's journey, reading it, it was so
it's
amazing to me, and
hope.
it's so
That's
nice to
hope,
know that's
right?
hope.
That's
That's so
hope.
that was
We need to
helpful to
know
you?
it's possible to come out. Yeah. I mean, that is what keeps us going, right? We need to know that it's possible to get out of whatever darkness we're in. But something I noticed on my own journey was that a lot of the stories kind of skip over the process.
Mm,
Like, the reality of my healing journey was like,
right.
it was a decade probably. It was like a decade of like two steps forward, three steps back, and like messy, murky, like took a long time. And I think sometimes we hear stories like, I really struggled, but now I'm great. And it
Mm,
doesn't actually share the humanness of what healing is. And now that I have the privilege of being a therapist, like, this is what it looks like. Like, it takes time to shift our patterns, to, heal our nervous systems, to shift our beliefs, and to build the relationships and the life that is going to
mm,
nourish us. It's not a quick journey. And so I promised that, like, if I ever got to a place that I could speak out about this, because my introverted like self wouldn't so like vomit everywhere,
mm,
that I would
totally.
like share. And so that is what I do. And I do think it is probably one of the most powerful things. I mean, that's a big part of AA, right?
Mm.
Which
Oh, yeah.
is this, like, we come, we share our stories, we connect with other people. We derive so much meaning from narrative and story. And it's our most ancient form of healing. We've had
Mm,
it
mhm.
forever. It's a reason it still exists. It works, and it helps, and we need it as humans.
Um, yeah, in the 12 steps, the last step is sponsorship, which is basically taking your trials and tribulations and transforming them into a helping hand to the next person who's inevitably struggling, or else they wouldn't have sought your help. Um, right? Were you in AA?
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow. Can you tell us
When
a little
I
bit about your healing journey? Just in the
There's no
spirit
way I
of,
can
like you said, just a little bit
There's no
about
short version.
there's no short version. Okay, but give us a little taste if you can.
Mhm.
Um, and if you can, I'm gonna spice up this question. If you can weave in the nervous system healing work that you've done on yourself, I would be so grateful because people we're just coming to this understanding of the nervous system, um, and I've been finding it really helpful in my own life, and I see with my plain eyes that it's been helpful for you. So, all right, that's my
Mhm.
challenge to you.
Yeah. I'm that person who, like, when I see a new therapist, it's like takes us 2 sessions to go through my whole story. So I will
Mm,
try to give you my Cole's notes, but listen, I'm a kid who grew up like in a very dysfunctional home, and there was, abuse, and there was all kinds of stuff going on of parents who just needed to work on their stuff and didn't grow up in a time when people were working on their own stuff. And so, like many of us, we kind of inherit that
yep,
as kids.
yep.
And so I also think as a very, bright young girl, I was able to get away with it not being caught by anyone.
Mm,
So I was
mm.
a good girl. I got good grades. I didn't, have outbursts in class. And so even though I was struggling and looking back was a really depressed kid and had
Mm.
it later got diagnosed with ADHD. And now if you've been following along, I'm like actually going through the process of getting an autism assessment to see
Oh,
if like
yeah.
that's a part of my story. So
Natalie,
but nothing was caught.
I really, 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 identify with the story. Like, that's the sort of, that's the OA speak of being like, "Oh, yeah, me too." I really
Mhm.
identify with this story also, and I also, have been curious to know if, like, my highly sensitive nature, I also have ADHD. I'm like, "Am I autistic?" And if I am, well, what will it change? But
It
I
doesn't really change much
yeah.
other than
So
how we choose to identify and what it means to us, right?
yeah.
But it's not gonna make, like, other, like, therapies or like, it's not gonna change the work we do, like, the
Mm,
healing work is the same, but it
yeah,
can
human is a
change
human.
how we identify,
Mm,
and the story we have about
mm,
ourselves. And so, yeah, so I didn't fall apart. I, like, made it through my teenage years, developed an eating disorder, like, around 18, went off to university, and then, like, completely fell apart, like many people do when they finally leave their home. Because when we're in the home where the dysfunction is, it can be a survival response to actually stay contained and to, like, like there is. And also, you sometimes don't know how bad it is till you
mhm.
leave. And so I
Yeah,
think a part of my initial crumbling was moving out and meeting people and making friends and seeing them interact with their parents and being like, oh, I don't have that relationship with my parents. And oh, I never.
yeah.
And then, of course, you throw in the stress of university or college, and things just get really difficult for people who might have struggled when they were younger and kept it together. And now there's just too much pressure because you've got essays and exams. And so that was like the beginning of my unfolding, if we
Mm,
call it that,
mm.
and fell into, depression and had a suicide attempt and um, struggled with binge eating and just which turned into drinking and
Yes, it does,
um,
yeah.
so many years of trying to find ways to regulate a very dysregulated nervous system.
Mhm.
And so that's what food is. That's what substances are. They are
That's what
our
I
attempt to regulate a nervous system that is incredibly dysregulated and cannot cope with the world around you. And part of what's fascinating about diving into the highly sensitive and then the neurodivergent literature is as you start to learn about it, you understand how complex it is, that there
mm,
are some people who come into the world with these nervous systems that are more sensitive and that are going to be more impacted by the stressors in
mm,
their environment.
mm,
So that's why you can have 3 kids who grew up in the same home and they all have different experiences of
mm.
that home. Their nervous systems all have different experiences of that home.
Can you give us a working definition of a highly sensitive person?
Yeah. I know I didn't answer your question yet about what my healing looked like. We just got to the to the bad stuff,
Oh,
but
yeah, we didn't get well, you went to AA, that there was a healing there.
so I spent, yeah, about a year in AA, and I really like because I moved around a lot. I lived in Toronto, then I lived in New York, and then I lived in Israel, and then I was back to Toronto, and so I was never really in like therapy with one person because I was constantly moving, and I also struggled, like many people do, to find the right fit as a therapist. But I would say many years of like therapy, self-help, nutrition, exercise, like lifestyle. And then
Mm.
I think the biggest thing was my husband.
Mm.
As someone who never had secure attachment, my biggest healing came from my attached relationship, my securely attached relationship with my husband. And still to this day, it is my greatest tool in my healing.
I have to tell you, Natalie, I really do wish we were in person so that I could just hug you because I just had that moment with my husband this morning. A friend had hurt my feelings and the hurt went so deep. I turned to him and I was just like, it's been 16 years and you have loved me and stood by me. And I just am in awe of our bond. I'm just so grateful. And, you know, I am so moved by that experience for both of us that we
Yeah.
could create
Well,
family.
we get wounded in relationship, and so healing comes from relationship.
I'm so happy he's great. That you're great
Mm,
together. I'm so glad.
likewise. I likewise, and I wish for everyone. And it doesn't have to be a partner, it could be a friend, it can be like, but we
Totally.
need that. And I think that's where therapy can be challenging, and I've always
Mm,
known this, and it's why so much of my mission in life is figuring out what are the alternatives to therapy, because if you're just meeting someone once a week for an hour,
yeah.
that person cannot fill, they're not going to be there in all those moments when you need them.
But
We
you
need
are.
people.
We
I
need other
am.
people. We need people.
We
I
need
actually
other people.
but we do need other people. I had a therapist who once was like who kept saying like, "I need to be my own best friend, and I need to be my own mom, and I need to be," and I was like, full of rage because at some point, first of all, I am. By default, we are. We are the only people walking around holding our nervous systems together, loving us to the best of our ability all day, every day, through the night. And sometimes, particularly if we didn't have what we needed growing up, or if we are highly sensitive, meaning we had a more sensitive nervous system, that can dysregulate more easily, we need someone to lend us their nervous system, which you speak so beautifully about. Can you tell us what that means, actually? When you
Lending the nervous system. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll define what a highly sensitive person is. I haven't forgot your question. But
You're
yes,
great at not forgetting. I
co-regulation.
really appreciate that.
Co-regulation is when we need to, like, let's just say human beings, we are hardwired to be interdependent. So there's a lie out there that says that I should be able to be my own healer and to do all of this on my own. We
To
need
buy
other
myself
people.
flowers.
Yeah, exactly. We get lots of messages out there that tell us we should be able to do this, but we're just not wired that way. And so we're wired to be able to co-regulate. So when my nervous system starts to get dysregulated, then I can borrow someone else's nervous system, my partner, ideally, who has managed to stay regulated. What can often happen is we both end up dysregulated, and then that's where chaos ensues. But if they're regulated, then I can borrow their regulation, and that can
Mm,
help my body start to come back into that place of
mm.
ease and regulation and calm.
You do
And
that
we're
with your
we're
children.
this is what you do with babies. This is literally
Yeah.
how we teach babies. They come out into the world, they cry, we put them on our chest, we release oxytocin. Oxytocin decreases cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. And once that happens, the cortisol starts to dissipate in their body. You just know, you can feel if you've ever held a baby on your chest, their whole body starts to relax.
Yeah.
And so they are learning that when I'm in connection with another person, a trusted person, I can feel safe and I
Mm,
can go into regulation and ease.
mm,
And they learn to connect the two. But if we don't have that, then we don't learn how to do that. And then we don't learn how to do that for ourselves. And so we have to also remember when we're telling people, how to heal, not everyone's starting from the same place.
mm,
And
mhm,
so it is a different journey to heal if you've had that strong, secure relationship
Mm,
with your own parent than it is to heal when you haven't. And so
mm,
we can give people a message that they're failing,
mm,
like there's something wrong with you, you're not trying hard enough, that you can't show yourself self-compassion and
mm,
breathe your way through this, because it's a lot to overcome. You just never learn that. You don't have the tools. And so
mm.
it takes a lot of practice. Like I'm talking years and decades of practice. And so I think it's important that we put that out there, that this is not a quick thing, that we're just going to like rewire our whole nervous system tomorrow.
Did you experience a rewiring when you met your husband, and then when, the more you co-regulated, the more safety you experienced? What did that look like for you?
I think it was a long journey. Like, I
Of
think
course.
it was years of like work before him. And then when I met him, I had already done a lot of work and then a lot more work with
Mhm.
him. And then being with him, having tons of opportunities where we trigger the crap out of each other.
Oh, yeah.
And then we have to learn how to come back and repair.
Mm.
And the repair is the thing I never learned as a kid.
Mhm.
And I think most of us never learned. We never had a parent, for the most part, say, I'm so sorry I yelled at you. It's just like brushed
Yeah.
like
That
under the
at that
rug, and we
time
never talk about it.
at that time, it just wasn't part of the vernacular to apologize to
Mhm.
children.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now this is something we're talking about, and something so many of us are aware of. And the
Mm.
more you practice these things, the easier it gets. I think for me, the biggest sign of my healing came when I had my first son, and I
Mm.
had already been on a healing journey for like 15 years.
Mhm.
And it was really hard, but I didn't relapse into any of my old coping stuff that
Amazing.
it had been years since I had, done any of that stuff. But the fact that I was able to navigate that hard stuff without relapsing into these coping mechanisms that had at one time been so familiar and
Oh,
so
yeah.
just there, that was a real clue to me that like, wow, like you've definitely rewired some serious shit here. Good
I
job.
it's
Good job.
really brava, really, and, I just love the way you call them coping mechanisms and not addictions, and you don't sort of I think, uh, I I'm more and more we're realizing that when people are, self-soothing by overworking or scrolling Instagram or, overeating, undereating, binge drinking, drugs, what we're really learning is that these are cries these are cries for help. The nervous system is hardwired actually to regulate
Mhm.
by any means necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we, as the adults and the people who are on the healing path, can tell our little nervous systems that haven't quite developed properly or fully yet, okay, but you know, eating a whole bag of chips is only going to dysregulate you for longer and harder. So let's not do that. It really is a
Mhm.
huge, huge sign of relief, actually, that you were able to hold your own with what I know. Your first child, well, babies are hard. Babies are a lot of work, but he was
Babies are hard.
colicky? Is
He
that what
was
they would call it?
colicky.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was
that's a lot of
colicky. He
demand.
had a tongue tie. Like breastfeeding was just
Mm.
like horrifying, like horrifying, like
Oh, yeah.
blood, like coming out, like when he would like spit up like blood, like it was really bad.
Your blood. He would spit up your blood.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
he was like
just to
biting,
be
like
clear.
my nipples were bleeding into his mouth because he
Yeah,
was like, my nipples were so destroyed
yeah.
that like he was drinking my blood. And I was
Yeah.
like, it was just like, and it was awful. And I think, the thing that nobody prepares you for when you come into parenthood with your own childhood traumas
Yeah.
is that when things go wrong, when things are harder, you're going to see it as proof of the thing that you feared the most, which is that I'm going to be exactly like my own parents. I'm going to
Mm.
fail. I'm going to be a bad parent, which is one thing. you then also see your own parents in a different light because you're like, okay, I can see why this was so hard for you. Like, I get it. I don't condone it, but like, I get, like, this is hard as shit. Like, this is, especially if you have a baby. Like, I was actually on my final Zoom call for my course yesterday, and we were talking about having a colicky baby. I'm like, I remember my son was like 2 weeks old, and I'm like, I get how like you end up with like shaken baby syndrome. Like, thank
Oh,
God
yeah.
I have the tools and the resources to like
Yeah.
not get to that place. But like, let's be clear, I was not that far off from that place. When there's a baby crying like 15 hours of the day, like I can see how someone who doesn't have the support to be like, just stop crying. And you end up with these babies who are in the hospital because of
I
shaken baby
know.
syndrome, or like people who walk out and never come back because
Yeah.
they think I'm not cut out for this.
Yeah.
Like I never had more empathy in my life. And I thought I had had a lot of empathy and had experienced a lot of hard things. But that was the lowest point.
Mm.
Like the hardest thing I ever experienced
Was a
was
colicky
those early
baby?
months. Yeah.
The first
Oh,
time,
yeah.
the early
The
months.
f- those yeah, that first time, those early months, and like not being able to breastfeed, and like
Oh,
just feeling like a failure, and the
yeah.
messaging around breastfeeding, and like there's just so much out there in the parenting space that does so much damage.
You know,
Um
I
and like that's a
have a
whole other conversation
I mean, really,
if you
so
want to
much
go
damage.
there.
Yeah, I mean, here we are in the parenting space, so I hope I'm not causing any damage. Hi, friend. I hope I'm not causing any damage. I love you so much, you audience person. I just thank you. But I agree that there's so much hogwash out there that's really damaging to women and babies. Like, and many of us are doing it ourselves. I have friends who are walking around in bikinis and their gentle parenting approach, and it's just like, okay, but like how much help do you have? How much education do you have? Like, I mean, and maybe that's my own stuff I'm projecting, but I remember also having a lot of trouble breastfeeding in the beginning. And my pediatrician was like, "Give him a bottle. Just give him a bottle. Like, give him a bottle, give him the breast, mix it up." And I was like, "No, no, no, exclusive breastfeeding." And he's like, "All those blogs you're reading, those women have time to talk about exclusive breastfeeding. The people who are not talking are the ones who are pumping, who are breastfeeding, who are bottle feeding, who are doing it all over again within 3 hours." And there are many of those women. And I took it in, but I don't know that I believed him because it was just like onslaught of,
Mhm.
well-meaning mothers mostly
Yeah.
who
Oh, I had a
who
lactation
are
consultant who
yeah.
showed up. She's like, if you give him, I told her I gave him formula because we started him on formula 2 weeks. We found out that I had low supply. He wasn't getting enough. He was not gaining enough weight. And so we went out and bought him formula and gave it to him. And then the lactation consultant showed up. She's like, his gut is never going to recover because of that formula you gave him.
I know. Or she said, or she called it McDonald's. And it's like, oh my god. Also, she's talking to someone who like recovered from an eating disorder. Like, uh, please don't tell me McDonald's. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's not true. I just want to like broadcast that it's not true. Like but babies need to be fed. Babies
Babies
need
need
to
to be
eat.
fed. And
Babies
also
need.
there's a difference like between evidence-based knowledge and what the research says and real life clinical stuff. And that's what I see most often in the parenting space where things go wrong is that we're
No.
sharing like this research study says that breast is best, and if you give formula they're going to have a higher incidence of ear infections, and but like we are presenting information in a vacuum because if I continue breastfeeding but my mental health tanks and I develop serious postpartum depression, you better believe the impact of my postpartum depression is going to be incredibly higher than the impact of that formula. So
Yeah.
we don't present the whole picture. And so parents, of course, if they're not trained and they don't know all of the whole picture,
Right.
They hear one piece of information and go, oh, shoot, I got to do this, not realizing that it's so much more nuanced and complex than that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you do a really good job of offering real life. I wouldn't even call it advice, perspective. I don't think you give advice so much, which I appreciate. I think you offer
Thank you.
perspective and some research, food for
I
thought.
try. It's hard to navigate, right? I think like and as someone who knows all the research, like it's hard sometimes because I know sharing things like you took my sleep course. Like there's things that we know and then there's reality. And so if we were all raising babies in a vacuum where like
Or a
we had
village.
all the support and in a village, right, where we had unlimited support and someone making our meals and didn't have to go back to work, and like if we had all the things, then we could do and create these perfect babies that we are able to do everything the research says, but that's not how we're living. And so then we have to make these choices, and there's
Right.
always a balance, right? Like what's the cost, and what's the pro and con to this, and what feels like the best decision right now, and just acknowledging like we're all doing the best. And I think
Mm,
I'm in it. Like I think that's the thing that's most important to me if I share anything on my account is like I know what it can feel like to be on the receiving end of some of those posts
mm,
when it's like some of the ones that are like yelling at your child, and I'm like thinking about how I yelled at my kid yesterday, and of course then immediately I feel like shit. It's
yeah.
like the what we consume impacts us, and we're all human. Like we're
Mm,
all, and this striving for perfection isn't like helping anyone, and it's also not helping our kids
right.
because it's not about being perfect. It's about teaching our kids how to be human. And human
Mm,
is having emotions, feeling anger, sometimes yelling, and then apologizing and repairing and
mm,
being able to stay connected even
mm,
while we experience the whole range of our humanity. That is the
mm,
gift we want to give to our kids, not this,
mm.
I need to be perfect and never make a mistake.
Oh my gosh, I do not wanna give my kids I need to be perfect because it's an impossible goal.
No, you
That's a
can't do it.
trauma response, needing to be perfect.
Oh, yeah.
And I do I think people use the word trauma loosely, but I do think that, temperature that we're in, women, where we have to be perfect parents, perfect bodies, perfect that for me feels like, ooh, that's a flavor of trauma, like a collective trauma around womanhood, that I'd like to step out of. And I do feel like we're
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah, we're doing
Me and
it.
you,
We're
babe.
doing it.
We're
We're
doing
doing
it.
it. We're doing it. It's also something we have to remember is like when you become a parent, your brain becomes even more vigilant. And so
Oh.
if you're someone who does have trauma or is highly sensitive or neurodivergent and has a more sensitive nervous system to begin with, and then become a parent, you're going to be even more vigilant because of
Mm,
course like we're wired to keep our babies alive. And
mm,
so it makes sense that we would shift into a place. They've done studies where you can see the changes to the brain. And so we know that parents have more OCD like thinking, more obsessive thoughts, more anxiety like thoughts. And then that gets hijacked by our culture, which is currently saying you have to be perfect. And
mm.
so it's a
Or
combination.
buy
Well,
this
it's connected,
to
right?
cure
Buy my
that.
service, buy my product, 100%. Yeah.
Mm,
And it's very problematic.
yeah. I feel so seen in that, by the way. I'm like, "Wait, why'd I get more crazy?"
Yeah, yeah.
I was like kinda crazy, but then I had kids, but then I had interestingly, I had a little boy, which I was like, "Oh, one level of crazy, notch up, alright, I can handle this," and then I had a girl, and for me, the identification of a little girl was like, "We're gonna get really crazy now." But I do feel like the universe, God, life served me these triggers in order for me to heal my nervous system, to get to know myself better, to connect me with women like you. I think it's not like I got more hyper vigilant, quote unquote crazier. I'm just poking fun at myself. If you're all identifying as crazier, you're not crazy. you're doing your biological imperative of keeping your kids alive
We
and
won't
yourself
cancel you
alive.
for saying crazy.
Um, yeah, but I do think that, like, the life has a way of sort of filtering through, whatever I need to do to get to the next step of my consciousness journey.
Yeah. I remember when I was pregnant, it was like maybe I'm at a higher risk for postpartum depression, but I was like, I had been well for so many years. It had been like 6,
Mm.
7 years since I had like had any. And I was like, I'll be fine. And then I like had my son and I was like, whoa, I was not prepared for how much of my shit was going to come up.
And it's just
Like
gonna keep coming up.
shockingly. Yeah, it just keeps coming up. It just
Yeah.
keeps coming up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great, ditto. Okay, let's really talk about what is the highly sensitive person, and then what's the highly sensitive family, because I love
Mhm.
that name, um, but I'd love for you to just define those terms if you can.
Yeah. So let me start with the highly sensitive family, and then I'll tell you what a highly
Okay,
sensitive person is. Yeah.
let's
So for
do it.
me, a highly sensitive family consists of like a family where there's one or more members who would have what I would call a more sensitive nervous system, meaning a nervous system that is more prone to getting dysregulated, getting bumped into fight, flight, or freeze, that is
Mm,
more likely to be impacted by the sights, the sounds, everything in their environment, the emotions of others, but also the things happening inside their body. And so this can be because you're neurodivergent, and within the category of neurodivergence, there are lots of things. Being a highly sensitive person is one of them. Autism is another one. ADHD is another one. Being gifted, there's tons and tons of them. And
mm,
what all these things share is this more sensitive nervous system and this different way of being and a different wiring and trauma. Okay. So having a trauma history actually does fall into the category of neurodivergence. And so for me, I am attempting to speak to all of that. I don't know how successfully I capture all of that, but it is all connected. This idea of stress and trauma and having a predisposition towards a different type of wiring, because then
mm,
we are more affected by stress and trauma. And
mm,
that is more likely then to impact us. And so
mm,
that was where the name came from. Um, when I started the account, my son was 2. And
mm.
so I had no labels for him. I had no other ways to describe him because 2-year-olds don't tend to get any other labels and diagnoses. Sometimes they do. But I had a feeling probably down the road we would find out other types of neurodivergence, given that my husband and I are both, have our own. I had my ADHD like diagnosis at 22, and as we talked about, other things will probably come up, but I had no other language. And so what was clear to me, like the highly sensitive family came from my experience of having this baby who was just differently wired, who needed to be held more, needed more help with co-regulation, screamed a lot more, cried a lot more, got more upset, was really couldn't take him to mom and baby groups because it was so like such a sensory
Stimulating.
overload for him.
Yeah.
Really struggled with sleep. All things that have to do with having this more sensitive nervous system. And so that is what I'm talking about. And I know because I've polled my community so many times that usually, like within the families that follow me, there's like one person who's highly sensitive identified, and one person who's highly sensitive and ADHD, and one person who's autistic and ADHD. And you usually have these families because a lot of it is genetic and gets passed down, where we have these different neurodivergences and different wirings, and they present in different ways, but they all kind of have this core of a
Mm,
nervous system that's more sensitive. And so highly sensitive person is one of those.
mhm,
And it's a term coined by Elaine Aron.
mm.
And it is not like a diagnosis, unlike things like ADHD and autism, which are in the DSM, and you go and get a proper diagnosis. Being a highly sensitive person is more of a way of understanding our temperament, our personality, and it's a trait. And
Mhm.
so a way I like to think about it is there's an acronym Elaine Aron uses, which is DOES, so DOES.
Mm,
So I'll lead you through what those are.
Okay.
So D stands for depth of processing. So highly
Wow.
sensitive people, because they have these more sensitive nervous systems, notice so much more around them. They are taking in all kinds of information, and they are taking in like a depth of information that most people don't.
My,
And
I once got a brain scan and they were like, "That's a lot of information." They were like, "That is so much information." Also, the other thing that they found was that, I smell things more, I see things more, I definitely feel things more. Other people's feelings, I'm like, "Is that mine? Is that yours? What's going on here?" But, also that what they found was that, there's, no activity happening in the, executive functioning area right in the front. But there's, she was actually this is a person who does brain scans, all the time. She's like, "The back of your head where creativity and empathy, it sort of lives, is, firing all the time. Boom, 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 boom." In the middle of, some random test, there's, a pretty boring, actually, like, I don't know, video game that they give you during that brain scan. Anyway, just thought I'd let you
And
know.
that makes
I
sense, right? And we
The
know
depth of the
neurodivergent folks struggle with executive functioning. And what do we need to access our prefrontal cortex? We need our survival brain to be turned off. We need, well, not turned off, but regulated and calm, right? So when our survival brain is going, this part of the brain shuts down because we need to conserve our energy and our resources. I'm not going to be problem solving and using executive functioning skills if I'm being chased by a lion. I just need to get the blood to my legs and run. And so there's definitely a connection there. So yes, that's the first one. And it's our babies who come out into the world and their eyes are wide open and they never fall asleep unless you're bouncing the crap out of them. And they need all kinds of stimulation to overcome the fact that they are processing so much information and their nervous system is going, rah, rah, rah. And so they just need so much more help to calm down and regulate. So that's a D. O, which is kind of what we are just talking about, is the overstimulation piece. So you're more likely to get overstimulated because you are taking in all this information. And it's the fancy word is neuroception. So neuroception is this process of kind of scanning our environment and saying am I safe? Is this safe? Is this dangerous? Is this safe? Is this dangerous? And so highly sensitive people will do that more often, and they're more likely to see things as dangerous that aren't. And so if you're doing that all the time, of course, you're going to get overstimulated and exhausted because that is a lot of work. And so we see that in meltdowns, right? We see that in our babies who are crying. We see that in our toddlers who are melting down because they are so overstimulated and overwhelmed by everything they're taking in. Tell me what's coming up.
Well, I just see it in myself, and I see it my son, we used to call him, spirited or gifted
Mm-hmm.
because those were the 2 things that, those are the 2 labels or whatever that I could definitely see. The depth of processing is such a beautiful gift, actually. I mean,
It is.
witnessing it in my child and then reflecting back on myself, I'm like, "That is the world needs that." And it does go hand in hand with "Oh, and now I've reached my I've re
Yeah.
oop, I've reached my limit before other people have, not because I don't have stamina, but because the way I'm navigating this theme park, let's say, if I go to a theme park or a
Mm-hmm.
department store, the way I navigate a theme park or department store is different from someone else. They can get through the whole thing and be done with the day and be tired. I'm a third of the way in, and I'm like, that cotton candy was a lot of cotton candy. Oh my God. You know? That
And
was
we're
what
all going to
was
have
going on.
differences around the things. I remember my mom, as a kid, my mom wanting to go to the mall, and I could be in the mall for 30 minutes and just get lightheaded. It was just too
Yes.
much for me. I hated going to the mall, hated it. And
Ditto.
so there is
Ditto.
this thing, yeah, that we move through the world differently. And so that's O. E is the empathy piece. So they've done lots of studies on highly sensitive people in their brains, and they know that highly sensitive people have more reactive mirror neurons, which means that if I'm feeling sad, your mirror neurons are what lights up and you experience that sadness. So you will feel what I'm feeling much
Mm.
more because they're more reactive than the average person.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
think about that in our kids,
Mm.
right? Who don't yet have any of those tools and skills. They are feeling so much more. And vice versa. If you're a highly sensitive person and your baby is crying, you're going to feel what they're feeling so much more than the average person, which is going to make your experience of parenting so much harder.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
And then the last one is sensitive to sensory stimulation. And
Mm.
so, a hallmark of being a highly sensitive person is that you tend to have at least one sensory system that is hypersensitive. So sounds can feel really loud, or smells can feel really, strong, or
Natalie,
lights are too bright.
can you imagine living in New York City?
I lived in New York City for 2 years.
Oh my god. It's been
Yeah,
I'm going on year 28 of living in New York City, and I'll tell you,
it's a lot.
a lot of smells. So
It's a
much
lot.
smells. And my husband, what's so interesting is, like, my neurotypical, beautiful, securely attached husband is like, "I do not smell it." And I'm like, "It is so strong. I really could die from this smell." And
For
he's
like a
like
year, I was trying to tell my husband there was mold. Okay. I'm like, I can smell the mold. There's mold in our roof. He's like, you're a lunatic. I don't smell anything. And when I was pregnant, everything got even more heightened. I don't know if you
oh,
experienced that, but when I was pregnant, like my sensitivities got even more. And so I was like telling him, he like thought I was crazy. Finally, I like convinced him to get the people to come. They're like, yeah, there's mold right in the corner where I like told him it was, and I could smell it. And so the way, what I love about the way Elaine Aron writes about being a highly sensitive person is that she really positions it as this like beneficial trait that would have been like something that would have helped our like village survive. So if I'm the highly sensitive person in my village of like 50 people, and I'm the one who's going to smell the fire before anyone else notices it, I'm the one who's going to hear the rustling in the bushes before anyone else hears it. This is a trait that is like really adaptive and beneficial to have within our communities, like to have certain people who possess this trait who can help keep everyone else alive. But what it is really this like survival response, right? We have a more heightened survival response. And what it requires is a world that can nurture it rather than trigger it. The tricky thing is, we all live, for the most part, in worlds that are really busy, that are overstimulating, where we're always going, 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 where there's so much information. And it's the opposite of what a highly sensitive nervous system needs
mm,
in order to stay in that place where they're well and
mm.
balanced.
And that's where the mother comes in, right? Or the parent or the grandparent, or in the case of a child, now that we have this
Absolutely.
information, where we create a world within a world that is a
Hmm.
little more predictable, a little
Hmm.
kinder.
Yeah. And safer.
Yeah. I wonder
Yeah.
though, um, being uh, a highly sensitive person, maybe even being autistic, you'll keep us posted,
I will.
and having that tendency toward overstimulation, what happens at minute 40 when both children are still crying in the car and you're not at the destination? What happens to your body, and what do you do to take care of it in order to take care of the 2 little bodies in your care?
Yeah. So
So that you
it's
can
a few
create that
things.
world within a world.
Yeah, so it's first of all, it's knowing, like being aware that this is like who I am and that there
Mm,
are needs that I have. And so it's being able to plan accordingly. So I don't drive, like when my babies are babies, I don't drive anywhere farther than 5 minutes. My
ugh,
parents live 40 minutes away. I'm like, so if you want to come see them, you have to come here.
Mhm.
And so being able to say no to things, being able
Mhm.
to wake up in the morning and being like, I know we were going to go to the beach today, but I didn't get a good night's sleep and I'm feeling like I could get really easily triggered. Maybe today's not the day to go to the beach. Let's call it and stay at home instead. Like, it's being able to make these decisions about the way we live our life based on the practice of learning to tune in to my body and what's happening,
Mm.
which is the first skill that's really hard.
Mm.
Being able to slow down enough to be like, ooh, how am I feeling this morning? I know I told my friend I'd meet them at the park, but I might have to be the person who cancels today. We might
Yeah,
not
I'm
have a
that person who
48-minute drive.
cancels. I'm that person who cancels. I wonder if you experience the guilt or the shame around being that person, or have you good, tell me more about that. So I'm gonna adopt that. Tell me more about not feeling bad about getting your own needs met. Yes. Oh.
I think for me, I know my core value is being well. I
Mm.
know how hard I have had to fight in my life to be in a place where I am well. And I also know that because of my history, I am just more at risk for getting out
Mm.
of balance. And so, because I have this as my value, and especially now having children, it is, I want to be well so that I can support them.
Mm.
Every decision is in service of that.
Mm.
And if a grown adult is going to have feelings about me not showing up for the play date, those are their feelings and they can process them and I can apologize, but I feel zero guilt for that. And I think we all just need to have more compassion and goodwill and be able to see that everyone's just trying to do their best.
Mm.
And yeah, but I do think it comes down to being really solid in like, what is my value? Like, what's my core value in this world
Mm.
and how I want to move through it.
I really appreciate that. That feels so good. It also feels so good that you made time for this, for me and you. It feels so great to know that this is part of
Likewise.
your, feeling good. How amazing is that?
Oh, yes. Well, I like have been so excited to do this because, like I said, I like love you. I like love seeing your stuff and I love your like your Yiddish singing. And like, I just like want to like, just like come hang out with you
I know.
for like a week. But
Where in Canada are you?
I'm in Toronto.
You're in Toronto, that's right.
It's not that
That's
far.
right. No.
90-minute flight.
It really is amazing what yeah, that's not bad. It really is amazing what I know that Instagram is not a great place sometimes, but really, I mean, the fact that we have such a kinship just based on interacting online is really amazing, and it's so
Mhm.
nourishing. You know, it's so worth the time, actually, to connect with people who are like-minded.
I
You just
agree.
you just speaking your own life story and also offering that amazing wisdom around feeling good about, working toward your wellness, maintaining your wellness, even amplifying it was such medicine for me. I'm so
Mm,
grateful.
thank you.
I'm
Well,
so
thank you for
grateful.
having me here.
Thank you so much.
Thank
What is your, hope for your community moving
It's a
forward?
good question. It's something
Mm.
I think about a lot. I think my hope is that it can be a safe place.
Mhm.
It can be a safe place for people to feel seen and to hopefully learn something
Mhm.
about themselves or their kids that will make its way into their day in some way.
Mm.
But I think, like anything, as I evolve and grow, I mean, I never would have. You want to know something crazy? When I was
Yes.
in Israel,
Mhm.
I had a rabbi. I was living with a rabbi, and it's a crazy story for another time, which you'll love, but we don't have time because I saw she gave you the 5-minute warning. But he was like, one day you're going to write a book that's going to help thousands of women. And I remember thinking, like, why women? Because I was like 25 and I'm like,
Yeah.
why just women? Like, what am I going to write that's going to just be for women? And now I write online and 98% of my audience is women. And I'm like, oh my God, I would have never seen it. Like, I would have never known that becoming a mother would have lit this fire in me to become so outspoken about all of these things.
Yeah.
But and so who knows, in 10 years, there might be another fire that gets
Mhm.
lit under me in a different way. But for now, I'm happy to just be in it and continue getting to meet incredible women like yourself. And it's just been such a gift. And yes, there's lots of crap that comes with social media, but there's lots of incredible stuff that comes as well, like being able to meet people you otherwise would never get to be able to meet
Yeah.
within your like little village or town or city where you live. So, yeah, I
I
just feel
I
really
hope
grateful.
I feel really grateful too, and I hope that maybe one day we can read that book. You know, I can go on Instagram and read a lot of your beautiful writing, but wouldn't it be cool if it was in a book? I
Mm.
also love the I love the little tidbit around 98% of your community are women, and I just imagine like those women creating the world within a world. You know, like with these. I think men are fantastic. I mean, the two men that we just 3 actually, when including that rabbi, are changed our lives completely, right? Like, our partners in particular.
Mhm.
Um, but there is something about the strength of women, the softness of women, the curiosity of women to learn a whole new language. The nervous system really is a whole new language. This new, um, like, research around being, neurodiverse, it's new and it's subtle, and I just really honor all of you who are listening, all of you who are listening and who have listened throughout this entire conversation because it's that curiosity and that dedication to creating these world within worlds, this safe container for our families and for ourselves that actually will ripple out into the greater collective. I really do believe that.
Yeah, I do too.
Thank you for your work. Where can we find you?
You can find me at Highly Sensitive Family on Instagram. My website's www.highlysensitivefamily.com. And yeah, send me a message. Let me know if like this is how you found me. I'd love to hear from you. I try to get back unless you like I get 500 DMs at once. I try to
Mm.
respond to my DMs to the best of my ability. So yes, would
Well,
love to hear
that's
from
how
you.
we met, so just to if you're feeling shy, I'll let you guys know. We're there.
Yeah, we're
This is
here.
literally how we met, in your
Yeah,
DMs.
100%.
Thank you so, so, so much. I can't wait for
Thank you.
more of our hanging out and to hear the rest of that story, by the way, Natalie.
One day.
Have a great day, friends. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Mom Curious podcast. My name is Daniella Rabbani. I am your host, and I would love to continue this conversation at Daniella Rabbani on Instagram. And if you'd be so kind to rate and review, share this podcast, I would be just really grateful. Catch you next time, every Tuesday on the Mom Curious podcast, produced by Hoff Studios. You can find them at Hoff Studios on Instagram as well. All right, have a great day.